right, welcome everybody that's already connected to our Pointerpro Academy ISO 27001 webinar. It's time already. I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds to see if more people pop in, and then we will get going. So my name is Mathias. I'm the CTO at Pointerpro. And I'm also the owner of Content and Coffee, which is a consultancy agency. So as I said, we will be diving into the ISO 27001 standard, or the norm. Since Pointerpro actually achieved ISO 27001 certification in April, halfway through April, we actually received our official certificate. Of course, we knew a bit before, after the last external audit, that we passed. As you can see, Bart, our CCO, was incredibly happy about it. So we will basically take two approaches in this webinar. First of all, I will talk a bit about what is ISO and ISO certification and why does it matter? Why is it of significance for us, but also for all of our customers? And the second part is also how did it actually impact our organization in its day-to-day operations? Because if you want to take ISO certification seriously, it does require quite a bit of changes within your organization. So with that, I will move forward. So what is ISO 27001? ISO 27001 is the international standard for information security. So it basically sets out the specifications for an effective ISMS. ISMS is short for Information Security Management System, in case you should wonder. By the way, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to drop them in the chat. Either I will pick them right up, or if they require a bit more elaborate explanation, I will pick them up. I will pick them up at the Q&A at the end of the webinar. So feel free to drop them in. So like I said, ISO 27001 is the international standard for information security. And it basically sets out a collection of best practices and best practice approaches to help organizations manage their information security. And it's very important to realize that it's about managing and standardizing your information security practices. The standardization is very important to make sure that you can actually keep it up, that you can keep doing it as your organization grows or as incidents arise throughout the day-to-day operations of your organization. It's incredibly important to make sure that you can then actually fall back on standardized procedures that have been practiced by the people within your organization to make sure that you can do it correctly. Throughout our certification course, I've actually spoken to all of my colleagues internally a lot about, you really have to compare it to being a firefighting team that practices the actual practice of firefighting. They can only save lives because they have practiced it before. They know how to respond in certain situations. Of course, the firefighting on our end is how do you go about information security, data sensitivity, phishing, security threats, and all these kind of things. So it's really a set of standardized approaches to help you manage information security. So like I said, why should you standardize? Well, if you would ask ISO, they basically stipulate it like this. They say, look, ISO was founded with the idea of answering a fundamental question. What is the best possible way of doing this? Of course, the word "this" can mean various things. We will see in a couple slides that ISO has an entire range of certifications, all focusing on different areas. For us, it's all about ISO 27001, information security, but you also have other standards like 9001 and so forth, focusing on other aspects, but more on that later. So it's really about what is the best possible way of doing this. And of course, the best possible way, not according to me or according to you, but according to an industry best practice. like I said, my little metaphor of the firefighting brigade is quite applicable. It's about streamlining what we do and how we do it to make sure we remain in control as the company grows, or when an incident happens and the pressure rises. It's very important to have a streamlined process that everybody knows and knows how to stick to. Or as we sometimes also rephrase it, it's about keeping the race car on the racetrack when speed increases. Making sure you can get around the track safely at 5 miles an hour is significantly easier than when the speed increases. Whether speed means growing your company or when an incident happens and you need to act fast, because both of these might happen. A funny anecdote that I want to share is the ISO 27001 is all about a non-existing company in a non-existing industry. It sounds very funny when you say it out loud, but when you think about it, it actually makes sense. It basically means that ISO has gathered a set of best practices in various areas throughout your organization in terms of information security that have been defined to be very broad and sometimes quite generic, to make sure that you can apply them to your company, whatever your company size is or whatever your industry is. Because ISO 27001 certifications can be done for a SaaS company like ours, but it could also be a car manufacturer or an environmental company or an energy company. And of course, the nuances within the industry or the company size are different. And that's actually one of the things that we found out that are quite challenging at times, making sure that you implement the norm correctly, because the norm is really what you certify against. You need to make sure that you comply with all the best practices in there, but in a way that it actually makes sense for your company. If you're a very large multinational with, I don't know, 1,000 or more employees or colleagues, you will have slightly different implementations or even significantly different implementations than when you're at 30 or 35 or 40 people organization. So you have to really dive into these norms and these best practices to make sure that you actually that you can actually apply them to the size of your company, because the real value of ISO certification, of course, the certificate is the prize at the end. It's the cherry on the cake. But the whole point of becoming ISO certified or any other standard for that matter is making sure that you've actually implemented it on the work floor with your colleagues, because only then will you have the real value of your certification. So what do you standardize? Well, as always, especially within IT context, it depends. I've mentioned it before. You have various ISO standards. I've briefly mentioned ISO 9001, which is about quality and handling customer complaints, which is not relevant for us. You can also go for ISO 27001 or SOC 2 when you're talking about information security or cyber security. I will talk a bit more about SOC 2, which is an alternative to ISO 27001 in a couple slides. You also have ISO 14000, which is about waste reduction, so a different scope entirely. And then whatever acronym that has an S in it that you can come up with. So let it be clear that there is a lot of standardizations out there, all with various scopes and focus points. So it's really important to make sure that you select the one for you, which all depends on the area of expertise or the area of focus lever you want to move forward with. It's perfectly possible, by the way, to say, look, we are going for ISO 27001 certification today, and maybe next year we will go for ISO 9001. So they are not exclusive. You can have multiple ISO certifications for that matter, or you can perfectly certify against ISO 27001 and then go for SOC 2 certification later on, which is also possible if you so choose. So for us, the question became, are we going to go for SOC 2 certification or ISO 27001? If you remember from the previous slide, they both talk about information security and how to go about that. And it's a question we really spend some time thinking about because they're both quite similar. And of course, these tracks require a lot of effort and dedication to make sure we get it right. So for us, it was all about ISO 27001. When you make the decision between these two, and maybe your organization is also approaching an ISO certification track or is wondering, we should have an information security certification, which one do we choose? It's very important to note that they're 85% similar. If you're a service company, which we are, we provide a certain service to the outside world. We don't sell physical goods, for example. It depends a bit on your geographical business focus. SOC 2 is very well known in the US, while ISO is very well known here in Europe. And the funny anecdote, the funny part is when you ask Americans if you believe ISO certification is harder to achieve than SOC 2, they will tell you, yes, I think it's harder to do. And Europeans believe quite the opposite. The explanation or the reason behind that is most probably what you know best is usually perceived as easier. Because when you look at it, and if you look at them in depth, they're actually very, very similar. So it's not, I don't think it's fair to say that one is more difficult than the other. It's all about making sure you stick to the norm, which in this case has a similarity of about 85%. So what is SOC? Before we dive into ISO a bit more, let's just take a minute to very quickly recap what is SOC certification. SOC also has a focus on service organization, so that is very similar to ISO. And it's important to note that originally SOC was not even IT focused. If you look at SOC 1, for example, it's all about financial reporting. SOC 2 then has an IT focus, security, availability, confidentiality, but in a broader sense than just IT. And an important side note is that SOC 2 actually allows you to choose which areas you certify in. So if you should ever come across a company that has SOC 2 certification, it's always very useful to make sure you find out which areas did they choose to certify in. Because it is perfectly possible to say, look, we don't certify for security nor confidentiality. We will just have SOC 2 certification for availability, which is a very different scope than when you go for all three, for example. You also have SOC 3, which is very similar to SOC 2, but for a broader audience. For the sake of the webinar, I will not go into the details of this. Just know that it exists out there. So what is SOC? It's basically run as the ISO 27001, and all other standards are run by ISO, the organization behind. SOC is run by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So as you see in the name of the organization or the institute, it doesn't have an IT focus at all. It really originated from the accountancy or financial world. SOC 2 or SOC in general, has two types of audits. So if you ever come across a SOC certified organization, make sure you also find out whether they are type 1 or type 2 certified. Type 1 has an opinion about the effectiveness on the controls at a certain moment in time. And type 2 provides an opinion about the effectiveness on the controls during a certain period of time. And that is very important. So if you look at these companies, usually they will go for type 1 first, and then 6 to 12 months later, type 2, which makes sense because then you can evaluate between 2 points in time. If you give it a bit of time, you will see that there is a boatload of ISO norms out there, but even if you take a broader scope than just ISO certification, you will see that if you just look at quality management alone, you will see that there is a lot of different norms and standards out there. So making sure you choose the right standard for you is really, really important. Certifying against these standards is not trivial. If you want to get it right, it really requires dedication, effort, and resources, both in time and money. So it's really important to make sure that you choose the right certification for you. Generally, you don't go about certification all by yourself. You will also have probably some consultant or another organization that guides you through the process. They will also be able to help you decide on which standard you should probably choose or focus on. So don't take this choice lightly. So eventually we had to decide for Pointerpro, is it going to be ISO 27001 for us, or are we going to go for SOC 2, or what do we go for? Eventually, we went for ISO 27001, which is not a surprise given the name of the webinar, because it really has this the right focus for us. We're a service company, we're based in Europe, and so on and so on. So ISO 27001 is a framework for information security, and it's all about setting up that information security management system. It sounds quite complex. You basically have to look at it as a set of controls or a set of best practices you have to adhere to make sure that you can have your risks in check, basically. It's all about risk management. That is the key focus within ISO. And the ISO 27001 framework describes how you need to build, or how you have to build and iterate on an ISMS. The word iterate is very important, because it's impossible to get these things 100% right the first time. That would be very amazing, but it's not true. As everything, you need to iterate, learn, and improve along the way. As you can see, there is within the ISO cybersecurity space, there's also different variants out there. You have 27002, which actually helps you implement against 27001, so it's a bit confusing. 27005 is really focused on risk management, and then 27017 is focused on cloud computing. So again, let it be clear that you really have to make sure that you do your homework properly on how to decide which norm or standard you want to go for. Building that ISMS is really what it's all about. I will go a bit more in depth a bit later on how we actually did that at Pointerpro. So what is the impact on Pointerpro and your data security? If you're listening in as one of our customers, you're probably very interested in, okay, how does that actually improve the security of my data and everything I have within Pointerpro? Basically, we had three areas, three focus areas. The first one is people. All the people within Pointerpro need to make sure that, or we needed to make sure, to rephrase, we needed to make sure that all of our colleagues within our various departments and teams actually know what it means to be ISO certified and what it entails. What do they need to learn, and which awareness did we need to install? The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is security awareness trainings. So we organize very regular security awareness trainings for our colleagues and teams, ranging from information sessions to false phishing emails that go out to colleagues to help them identify, is this a phishing email? Is there any risk of clicking on this link? And the very well-known challenges within the cybersecurity space. But also training. Remember my metaphor with the fire brigade. What am I supposed to do when I accidentally clicked on a phishing link? And nobody's perfect. Sometimes these phishing emails, for example, can be very, very tricky to identify. So what do I need to do when I think I clicked on a phishing link, or when I think something's going on? So having this training done right and making sure that people have practiced it before it actually happens is super important. Knowing how to put out a fire before the fire actually happens is really important. Workflows, I will talk a bit more about that in a minute, but you also have to start standardizing and writing down what do we do and how do we do it. It sounds very simple and straightforward if you put it like this, but when you actually start doing it, you start noticing there is quite a bit of nuance here that we need to pay attention to. If a phishing link is being clicked, okay, how do we iterate? Do we have a service desk that then needs to take action? Do we want them to report it directly to a manager? Stuff like this is really worth thinking about, because that's what actually the workflows you create will actually end up in a training for the people within your organization to familiarize themselves with. So basically, these and when you have the focus on the people within our organization, we have awareness trainings or awareness sessions, training to actually train and exercise and practice all the procedures and workflows, and then start creating the workflows, preferably together with the people within your organization, because the more involved people are, the better they will understand and know why a certain workflow is important. Second, ISO requires quite a bit of policies and procedures. There's quite a bit of paper trail involved with an ISO certification, which makes sense. If you want your organization to adhere to a certain standard, that standard needs to be documented. This is how we do things. Again, workflows come back into play because, of course, you need to make sure that you practice these workflows with your people. They can only practice the workflows when they're actually written down and available for everyone to see. It's very important to understand that these information security policies, procedures, workflows, all these documents are not just IT department focused. So, for example, the information security policy is applicable for both the marketing team, the sales team, even the development team. So that is very important. These workflows are not just revolving around the IT team. It's really organization-wide, which makes the whole training and awareness even more important. Technology, of course, in an organization or in an IT department especially, but in an organization that uses technology and IT to operate, which is basically every organization today, you also need to make sure that you have the proper measures in place. For us as a SaaS company, pen testing is a very significant part of it. Pen testing, to maybe elaborate on what is pen testing. Pen testing is actually providing our platform in a safe environment. So it's not on our actual production environment, but there is an exact replica of the production environment being made that is then being tested by a cybersecurity company that actually tries to break in and abuse your platform. The result of this, so they're called ethical hackers or white hat hackers, try to break into your platform in order to test the security. It's basically the burglar trying to break in to verify, are the locks in my house actually safe? The end result or the end deliverable of such pen test is a report that will inform you about the strengths and weaknesses of your platform and where you can improve. So that is a very important part for us at Pointerpro to make sure that all of our key components within the platform get tested regularly. Managed devices is another one. Making sure that all the devices, mobile phones, tablets, notebooks, computers, servers, everything is being managed in terms of security updates, patches, operating system needs to be up to date, and so on and so forth. But also think about drive encryption, one of the key aspects. Even if you're not a SaaS company, by the way, imagine one of our colleagues is working on the train to work, to the office, and the laptop gets forgotten in the train or gets stolen. You want to make sure that the hard drive of that laptop is properly encrypted, so people cannot just read what was on the laptop. So these things are really important. I'm just naming a few here, by the way. These people, policies, procedures, and technology have a lot more focus areas underneath them, but it would lead us too far into, it's a 30-minute webinar. It would take me too far. Last but not least, the fire drills. I've mentioned it a couple times before. Having all of these policies, procedures, workflows in place is very, very good, but that is just the easy part between parentheses. You need to make sure that the people, your colleagues within your organization actually know what to do with these documents. Simple enough, they need to know where to find them, but they also need to be able to understand them and act on them when it is necessary. So it's really important to schedule these fire drills or exercises very regularly. Last but not least, I want to share some things to keep in mind. Because we see a lot of customers ask us and have been involved throughout the process, are you ISO certified and where are you in the process, and so on and so forth. When you look around on the internet and you start visiting some websites, you will see a lot of strange behavior as well. You will see companies that claim to be ISO certified and they will just have the ISO logo on their website. It's very important to make sure that you understand it properly. I have put the ISO certification logo at the top of the slide here. This is our ISO certification banner or logo. You will also find it on our website. What is very important is if you take a close look, you will see that it contains a version number. At the top, it says ISO 27001:2022. That is the version of the standard we have certified against. Because be careful, there are various versions of the ISO 27001 standard. Second of all, you need to make sure that the auditing body was mentioned. In our case, this was brand compliance. So when a website just displays the ISO logo, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have been ISO certified. It should even be a red flag because it's not actually allowed to do that. The only one that is allowed to use the ISO logo is the ISO organization itself on their own website or branding. So an ISO certification banner should look similar like the one here, mentioning the auditing body and the version of the standard. Secondly, if you want to verify the due diligence, if you're doing due diligence on one of your vendors, being ISO certified is very good and is a very important requirement, but make sure you always ask for the statement of applicability. The statement of applicability is the document that actually outlines the entire scope of your ISO certification, because also ISO as a norm allows you to exclude certain areas that you say, I don't want to certify against. That should not necessarily be a problem, but you should be aware. And it's ideally, you know, if the company is certified as a whole, or if they excluded certain components or departments within their organization. A very practical example is when companies get acquired by larger vendors. If the smaller company was not ISO certified and it gets acquired by a larger organization that was ISO certified, that does not mean that the smaller company automatically becomes ISO certified. That is not true. So that is something to be very cautious about or to really keep in mind. Last but not least, but that's more nice to have, is ask for a small introduction call or email with the CISO. CISO is the person in charge for cybersecurity, which is my role within Pointerpro. Is it required to have a CISO? No, not necessarily. But if they have if they have the role attributed to someone, you can at least know for sure that somebody is keeping an eye on everything related to information security and cybersecurity. So for me, items 1 and 2 are very crucial. Number 3 is a little bit more nice to have. That's it. 2 minutes left. I think that's perfect in terms of timing. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then I will try to answer them right here and now. If you should have any questions after this webinar, don't hesitate to send me an email. The email is on the screen here. So then you can always get in touch with me that way, whether it's about ISO in general or Pointerpro as a platform. There's one question coming in by Dario. Hi, what is your feature development release process? That's a very interesting question. Building new features and iterating on features and improving them over time is, of course, something we do on a day-to-day basis with our development team. Within the ISO standard, you have something which is called the secure development lifecycle that actually stipulates in detail how you go about development of new features, security fixes, and so on and so forth. For us, I will try to give you the short version. It basically means that our development team will build a certain feature. It will then be reviewed, checked by 2 other developers. So the 4I principle is very important for us. After that, there will always be automated testing. So tests that actually prove in an automated way that the feature still works and that it doesn't break anything else in the platform. It will then go to through an automated process that scans for security vulnerabilities within the code that has been written. And it then gets deployed to an acceptance environment where we actually do functional testing, where our QA engineers will test the feature and make sure that it actually works and functions properly and is secure. They will also try to break it intentionally to see, okay, is this functioning correctly? And is it responding correctly to error scenarios? Because that's very important. And then it goes to production after approval. If a feature is very large or important, think about the release we did last year with Distribution Portal. That was a very large new component that we released. Then we also have a separate pen test just for that individual component to make sure that the new component, if it is large enough, is actually secure and is actually pen tested before it goes live. So that's how it works. All right. Perfect. I don't immediately see any other questions coming in. So with that, I think I will wrap up here. Like I said, my email is on the screen. There will be a recording afterwards. So if you didn't get my email, that's fine. You will be able to rewatch the recording, and then you can always get in touch with me about ISO or the way we do it at Pointerpro. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.